Welcome to Thrive, the podcast. Welcome to Thrive, the podcast, where I'll be talking with guests who've created extraordinary results in business and life through listening to and following through on their intuition in the face of logic, reason, and rationale, to demonstrate why your inner navigation is the most important advisor you'll ever meet. No matter what you've been through, faced, feared, or run from, Thrive is here to uplift you and give you the courage and fortitude to face your future, even when you don't feel fearless. I'm your host, Elizabeth Adams. Throughout my 20s and some of my 30s, I operated from a place of workaholism, believing that when I reached success, all would be well in my world. Coming home to myself was a journey that began with a series of synchronicities that led me to learning how to tap my intuition and ultimately gave me the tools to live a far more rewarding life. Since then, I've been helping my clients to thrive. No matter what you're up against, grief, depression, unfavorable circumstances of any kind are only ever a starting point on the way to realizing the life you were born to live. The power really is within you, and my intention with this podcast is to enable you to unlock it. It's been a minute since Claire and I got together to record this episode of Thrive Through Intuition. In that time, her work's evolved, and so the links I share in the show notes have changed. Also, if you're looking to tap into your unique business blueprint, on the 9th, 10th, and 11th of October, I'm hosting Be Mavericks, a 3-day experience where I will be taking participants on a journey to their highest wisdom, where they will receive their own intuitive insight into the true vision and essence of their business, the patterning and conditioning that's been holding them up, and the tailor-made steps that they are uniquely placed to take. To secure your seat at the table, simply reach out to me on social media, on Instagram or Facebook, with the word Mavericks, and I will send you the relevant link. The event's happening at 6:30 UK time in the evening over Zoom each day for about 90 minutes. Right now, the fee is £33, and on the 3rd of October, that will go to £333. So now is the ideal time to claim your place. I look forward to seeing you there. Meanwhile, may this conversation with Claire inspire and ignite you. Claire, welcome to Thrive, the podcast. I'm so thrilled that we connected, and I love your story. You've created 2 six-figure businesses in the course of, well, one was in the last 10 years, and then the other one happened since 2020, and now you're on to your third. But it wasn't always like that. You know, you're a single mom, you've got 2 daughters, and it was a rocky road. I really want to share with listeners that journey. Because, you know, for us as women, money is something that it's only since I found out that it was the year after I was born that it became legal for a woman to have her home bank account. So
Wow.
in terms of, in terms of our, you know, there's always been genius women around who've created wealth from their creativity, but it's not been easy. It's not like we ran the show. And I feel like this tide is turning with women, especially where before we would play the men at their game to win. But now we're going, no way. This is our game. We're going to play it completely differently. We're not doing it your way anymore.
Yes, I love
And
that.
you're definitely someone who's walked that path. So yeah, tell us all the juicy details.
Okay, well, where do you want me to start?
Yeah, well, I guess the thing is, what was this, you know, where did you begin as an entrepreneur? What was going on in your life at that point?
Okay, So, a little bit of background. I always knew that I wanted to be my own boss, even as a kid. I just knew that that would be the path I would walk. I knew that I was meant for bigger things. I just didn't quite know how it would happen. I was just like, I'll figure it out along the way, right? And so I left school as soon as I could at 16. I was out of those gates, and I was like, I'll just, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. And so I then floated from job to job to job, just as stopgaps, and it was always meant to be whilst I'm figuring it out. And then life kind of threw me a curveball at the age of 18, and I ended up at that moment choosing a path of going into an abusive relationship for the next 15 years. And so
pause right there.
okay.
Let's pause right there, because that is a really critical junction when we're young women. And sometimes we know it's the wrong relationship and we do it anyway.
Oh yeah.
Anyway. So let's just pause there, because, I feel like this is a really important moment for us. What was going on? If you slow that down, what was leading you? What was pulling you? What was underneath that choice?
So for me, I had always been chasing love from as young as I can remember. Even being a little kid, I even remember, my parents saying to me, well, my dad in particular, that I was always jealous of his girlfriends, or, his wives, or whatever it ended up being. And I was always craving to be someone's choice, to be the chosen person, right? And I don't know where that came from. For as long as I remember, always been that way. And so that went into my teenage years, and I had boyfriend after boyfriend after boyfriend, trying to find love, right? That's what I was trying to do. And I didn't want it to be relationship after relationship after relationship. I wanted someone to be the one, right? At like 14. But I had a 3-year stint of a relationship from like 14 to 17. And that was, I would say, like my first kind of childhood love, right? Like my sweetheart of childhood. And it was not abusive or anything, but there were still things that were not healthy in a relationship, and that planted the seeds very early on for me that men treat you like crap, basically. That it doesn't matter, how pretty you are, how amazing a girlfriend you are, what you do, like they just treat you like crap. It doesn't matter. And so when that relationship ended, I then went on a whole year of just literally sleeping around, just here, there, and everywhere, because I was trying to find that love again. And I just wanted to feel wanted, I wanted to feel desired. And then basically I kind of started realizing that this is not great, nothing's kind of happening here. And I was actually about to move away. So I lived in my hometown at that time, and I was about to move to the other end of England with my best friend who came from Liverpool. And I had my tickets bought for the next day, and we went on like one last night out to say goodbye to everyone, right? Because everyone knows everyone in that town. And we had gone out, and I remember seeing my ex now in like the local pub, and I knew who he was because everyone knows everyone, and I knew he had a bad rep, and I knew that he was the bad boy, and I also liked it. And yeah, I saw him. One thing led to another, and we ended up kind of kissing that night. And that night I made a decision not to move away the next day.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's a sudden decision. How did your friend take that?
I mean, she was fine because she was going at it because she was from Liverpool anyway, right? So she was like, well, I'm going,
Right.
like she had a family and stuff. But for me, it was a step into the unknown. But I remember that night thinking, I'm going to marry this man. I remember feeling like this was it was not a game, but it was like a conquest, and I was going to win it, right? It was like,
Wow.
this is the challenge of all challenges. If I can change this man to choose me, knowing his reputation, knowing, who he was, that right there gives me worthiness. That right there shows that I must be special. Like there must be something good about me. If I could, like if this man can choose me over his story, then that would give me what I needed, right? That validation and that whatever it was I was seeking. And so yeah, that was the fork in the road that led the trajectory of the next 15 years.
So did you end up getting married in the end? Yeah. Yeah.
10 years
Yeah.
later, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So during this time, it actually, we often use the word abuse, but from what you've described, this was serious. You were running a business. You'd made that leap from being an employee at some point in your relationship, and you
Yeah.
decided, I'm going to create this business, and you did an incredible job of it. Like you've set up at that time, you set up a business that still flourishes today,
Yeah.
which is without you needing to work it. Let's just add. Because that's half the skill. We can all set up a business, but we often don't know how to let it go and let it run and operate and generate for us. We're usually in there trying to make it happen every day or every week. So there's a real skill in that. But you were going home and he was actually beating you.
Yeah, I mean,
So it was
in the first
serious abuse.
in the
Yeah.
first probably 6 years there was physical violence. And he was also a compulsive gambler, which led to the anger issues, which led to the abuse, which all intertwined. So it was a very, very toxic space. And I also had our daughter very shortly after we met. So I also had, a young child to look after at the time. So yeah, the first 6 years there was physical violence. I tried to leave even by that time many times, and I would leave. I even moved out and got my own places sometimes, or I went to a women's refuge, and I would always go back. I would always go back because there was that, what if he changes? What if he changes this time? And obviously that never that never happened. But yeah, so after 6 years, basically we had a stint of about a year where I left. Like we were still, there was still on and off, but I had left and I was in my own home for about a year. And when I went back after that time, which is when we moved to London, the violence stopped. So I just want to say that. But there was, even after that, there was always mental abuse, and there was a lot of bullying, and there was a lot of fear mongering, and there was a lot of just general toxicity in the relationship. So
There's this split between the incredible success you were having in your business and your personal life. They're worlds apart. How did you navigate such a contrast in your life?
and this is what I talk about a lot, right? Because I basically lived two lives. I had two different personalities. I had two different identities. I had two different lives that, even in my own mind, I couldn't fathom how they were one, because I would go out and, I would go to high level meetings with like blue chip clients and really be on top of my game and feel, like really feeling like I'm smashing this, right? Like this is really freaking good. Like, I know I can do this. I know that they want what I've got, and I know that I can help them. And, I was like, yes, this is amazing. And then I would come home and it's like, I mean, I have to say, I've never had a healthy relationship, so I haven't experienced this yet, but I would come home and, you want to share that with someone. You want to just be like, oh my God, babe, I had the best day. And I couldn't do that. I would come home and I would have to almost forget everything that just happened, and all I could think about was, well, it was fight or flight, right? So it was like, all I could think about was like, what mood is he going to be in? How is this evening going to go? Like, is there football on? Because that was always like a trigger. And it was just like the primitive safety, going. And I was constantly on eggshells in my home life. And so the only way that I could really deal with that was by separating my worlds, really, because even I couldn't understand how I was the same person living both of these lives.
What is it that finally shifted in you that had you leave fully, and completely and be able to turn that page?
I've been asked that a lot, and it's very hard. I can't say there was like one moment, right? It was an accumulation of moments and moments and moments and moments. And the thing is I had always been trying to leave, right? It's just that I always went back. And why I went back was, yes, I wanted him to change, but towards the end, it wasn't that. It was fear. It was the fear, because every time I left, the threats would get more, I had my life threatened for 3 times. It, like, the threats would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so there was a point where it was like, which is scarier, right? Like the devil you know, or the devil you don't. And so it was the fear that really kept me going back towards the end. And I think there just came a point, I know, as my eldest was getting older and she was kind of hitting her teenage years, that had a really big effect on me, because I was very aware that she was now becoming aware, and I didn't like that at all. So that was a factor. The time that I had my life threatened for the 3rd time, and the situation in how that arose, that was a big factor. And I actually knew in that moment, I knew that I would never go back. Yet I still did one more time. But it was like every time I went back towards the end, I could feel it being like, I'm nearly there, like I'm nearly strong enough for this to be the last time. It's really hard to explain to anyone that hasn't experienced this, because you can look at it from the outside and just be like, what are you doing? Like, so it's really hard to try and understand why anyone would go back to something like that. But it's your comfort zone, right? It's what you know, and it's what I knew as most of my adulthood. I met him at 18 and I left at 33, so my adult years were primarily with him. And I did love him. Deeply. And it's very interesting, actually, because we can get onto this in a little bit, but recently I've actually got to the point where I've accepted him as a friend now, because we've got to that point. And I worried for one moment, like, if I would slip back. And it was a really big test for me that I had to do some really, really deep inner work. And I came out of it the other side, and I was like, I know that I'm not that person anymore. Like, that would never happen now. But yeah, so I can't really say what the pinnacle moment was. For me, it was just an accumulation to a point where the last thing he did was, I saw him at a bookies. I kind of caught him red-handed, right? Because he was a gambler. And in that moment, I was just, for whatever reason, able to say, I'm done. And I blocked his number, and I didn't speak to him for the next 3 years from that day. But I don't know why what really made that any different to before.
How did that impact your business? So you over 10 years built your first company. It's a 6-figure, multi 6-figure business. You've got some of the best corporate clients. What was going on? How did it play out for you in terms of what you achieved in that company?
Tricky, for one word. So I guess in the beginning, so when I set up my first company, I'm trying to think back in the timeline now. So when I first set up for my first company, I think we were actually at a point where I was living in my own place that year, when that happened. And so I was able to kind of start. I had a day job, so I was juggling a day job, being a single mum at the time to my eldest, and then I wanted to set up this business. So I started setting up actually with someone. I went into partnership to start with, but he left very, very quickly. It just didn't work. So that was all fine. And I was in my element in those days, actually, because I was on my own, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, right? Like, this is gonna be amazing. And then when we got back together after that, I was just starting to build the momentum up in the company, and then we moved to London. And I remember about the week after we moved here, because I wanted to come here because all my clients were here, right? And I was like, I want to be where it's at. Like, I want to be in the city because I came from a very small town in Devon, and I want to be where the buzz is. And so we came here, and I remember the first week I rung up my best friend. She's like, how's it going? You know, how's business going and stuff? And I remember saying to her, well, business is good, but I'm pregnant. And I was pregnant with my second child. And she was like, what are you doing? And I was like, no, it's fine. You know, it's all good. It's all good. So then I obviously was juggling being pregnant and then having another child as well, alongside growing this business. So yeah, I mean, I burnt out a lot. I burnt out a lot. I sacrificed a lot. I built that business in my masculine. I built that business on the back of, it was my survival mechanism. Basically, it kept my brain from thinking about my personal life. So I just absorbed myself into work. And yes, now it's paid off, but you know, I wouldn't do that again with where I am now. But for me at the time, it was probably my saving grace, you know, because it
Yeah.
helped me not be present where I was.
And it also created the bridge for you to leave, I imagine, because you were having the success that you needed that provided you with the means to leave. Had you not had it at all, it's possible that you sunk in that relationship entirely.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know that business can be a real escapism. Workaholism is an escapism. You know, it's often because there's something about our present life that is too hard to handle. We don't have the skill, we don't have the tools we need to address it as it's going on. So so you leave, you're free of the relationship, the business is doing well, and then 2020 happens and you get a brainwave. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So this was actually literally a couple of months after I had just like blocked him from my life, right? So I'd moved into a new place at the time. And I was really optimistic about the future at that point. I was like, like we were in tiny little 2-bedroom flat in Kingston, me and my girls, and I was just like, I feel good about this. Like, we've got this. And yeah, lockdown 2020 hit, and that year I'd kind of been having like a spiritual awakening. So I had been kind of absorbing myself into more of like the woo, if you like. And basically my eldest had got into watching crystal lives on Instagram somehow. Like, crystals were completely new to our world, but she had stumbled across it. And I had been like drawn to crystals for a little while. I'd started getting some in my house. Didn't really know a huge amount about them, but I was just like being drawn to them. And I just remember her coming to me saying one time, Mum, like, you love crystals, like you could do this. And I was like, yeah, I could.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that was it. That was the start of the next business.
Wow. That's so that just and you did it through Instagram as I recall. You just literally grew another six-figure business on Instagram. That was it.
Yeah, that was it. We didn't even have a website for the first year. It just blew up on Instagram. And
At this time, were you on Instagram? Did you know
I didn't
how
really use
Instagram
it.
worked?
I didn't really use it personally, like, you know, the odd thing, but I
Okay.
didn't know about growing a business on Instagram at all. Like, what I do now was not even in my orbit back in those days. It was completely new.
Whoa. Wow. So that's incredible. And you really I can't remember the time frame, but I think it happened quite fast that you set up this account, started selling crystals on Instagram, grew it to 10,000 followers, created another six-figure business.
Yeah, within 18 months, both of my businesses were then creating multi six figures. Yeah.
Wow. Astonishing. From just trying it out.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, basically. Because I think, like, when I look back at my life, you know, I'm a generator, and I always do best when I respond to the universe. Like when I look back at all of the things in my life, and I know now obviously that that's my how I should kind of act, but whenever I've tried to make things happen, it's never worked out, and every time that I've responded, it just flies. And so yeah, that was
So, were there other things that you tried over this period of time then that
not
weren't?
tried. So I would always have a lot of ideas, a lot of ideas, and I would get kind of so far, and then I would just stop, or like there would be a barrier or an obstacle, and you know, for whatever reason, like it just never got far enough to really get it out there. And yeah, knowing what I know now, it's because I was trying to force it.
So crystals came calling for you and you responded,
Yeah,
and then everything else fell into place.
pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Right. And so what tell us a little bit about how that business impacted you, the second business. What did you learn from having two businesses
It was
operating
very
like that?
different. It was very different because my corporate business was all service based. So I had never been in product before. So that was a whole new area to me. And again, I burnt out in that business, right? I'm not like portraying, like I have never built so far a successful business in my feminine. Everything that I've done to date has been in my masculine, bar what I do now. So these businesses were built off of hustle. They were built off of grind, and they were built off of like determination to make it a success. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but for me, the sacrifice was probably too high, because when
Yeah,
I
and
look,
let's talk about that actually, because the sacrifice in workaholism, especially as women, is huge. And we don't ever usually consider it. It's only now that people are starting to talk about it. I know for myself, it cost me relationships big time, especially with my children and especially with my eldest. It cost me personal happiness and satisfaction because my happiness and satisfaction existed in the future. It wasn't in the now. There was this constant feeling of discontent about my present life, so much so that I was always trying to escape. What were some of the sacrifices for you?
same. Yeah, same. Yeah, my kids, especially my eldest, you know, she was going through a really tough time, really tough time. She was having huge anxiety attacks, really struggled to start college, um, having meltdowns, like absolute awful, really bad time. And I didn't have it in me to really give her what she needed. I was so focused on the business, and not even the business, but doing all the things that had to be done, right? Like in products, like you've got to do all the wrapping, you've got to do all the packing, you've got to source the products, you've got to upload the products, you've got to take the photos, you've got to restock, like so much to do. And I was doing it all on my own because at that time I didn't really know if I should employ someone or not, or, you know, I was kind of like, oh, I don't really know where this business is going, you know, like it just kind of happened. I hadn't really planned for it. And it just got so busy that I kind of didn't even have time to stop and think about it. It was just in it. So yeah, I definitely sacrificed, you know, probably her, you know, if I'm being honest, her mental health. I'm not saying that that was because of that. That was because of obviously the stuff from the relationship, but I couldn't give her what she needed in that time. And I feel very guilty about that now, but we've had a lot of conversations about that. And I think, you know, she understands to the best of her ability. But also, I do believe that we can all only ever do our best with the tools that we have in any one moment. You know, and hindsight is a lovely thing, but you know, in the moment, we can only do our best. And
Yeah.
that's
But
what I've
the
always
great
done.
thing is that from the experience, you were able to, you know, it's similar to me in a way. I often work with people around the theme of workaholism and creating differently, creating from your inherent nature, your true nature, and coming into contact with that and valuing that because it often we dismiss it. We don't think it's valuable.
Yeah.
It's only usually because we've had to pay a price that we begin to think there must be a better way.
Absolutely. And that basically is what led me out of that business. So I was, the money was great. I was bringing in loads of money. But I had no time to do anything with it anyway, because I was just working so much. And I was getting so burnt out, and I was still feeling unfulfilled. Like I still felt like this isn't it, right? Like I'm meant for something more than this. I've got 2 businesses, like I'm earning multi 6 figures, and yet I'm still feeling empty. Like what the hell? And
Yeah,
that's when
that's
I
the
got into
weird thing
coaching.
that we don't expect actually, is that when the money is rolling, it often doesn't feel fulfilling. It's like, what? There's a whole other piece to what it really truly means to be deeply fulfilled. That has
I
nothing to do with the money in a
Yeah,
way.
I believe
Right.
that money can be deeply fulfilling, but you have to be fulfilled first. So if you're not fulfilled in your purpose first, then money is not going to fill that hole. Like you can only fill that hole with your purpose, and then money is just going to amplify that when it comes along. And for me, that's when I started. I don't even think I started seeking it out. Like it just came into my orbit, right? Like starting to see coaches and stuff on my Instagram for some reason. And I just started to get called into that world, and then invested in my first coaching, which was really the gate opener to where I am now.
What did you start to see? And actually, what were the first things you brought to the table in that relationship? Because I'm a firm believer that, you can hire all the coaches in the world, but you have to be willing to show up with it all. That's how I work. You got to bring it all to the table. It's no good thinking your coach is going to do it for you if you're holding back some aspect of your experience and you're not bringing it forward. They cannot work with that. They got to be willing to put it out there.
Yeah. I mean, my first coaching experience I was very naive in it because I'd never experienced it before, and I'd never even known about that world before. Like nearest thing I knew was counseling or therapy, right? Like that's closest I had ever been to anything like that. So I didn't really even have any expectations. I just went in with like, I was really called to this woman at the time, and she was all about like manifestation and just living like your best life. And I was like, this is what I need, right? I like she's got something that I want. Like she's happy and she's fulfilled, and I don't feel that, and I just wanted that. And so I started talking to her, and I was like, look, this is where I am. Like I don't really know what's wrong. Can you help me, basically? And she was like, yeah, like come on in, kind of thing. And that was really, I stayed with her for 9 months in a container, and it was just eye-opening into a whole new world that I had not been a part of before. Like from everything from human design to manifestation to self-development to subconscious mind work to hypnotherapy, like so much stuff. And it was all new to me. It was all new to me. And I was just like, like a kid in a sweet shop. I just like couldn't get enough. I was like, oh my God, like this is insane. Like I didn't even know about any of this. And so I didn't expect anything. And actually what happened was I ended up burning down my crystal business during that time. So I ended up financially worse off than I had been when I started, but emotionally, oh, so much better. And aware, like emotionally, intelligently, so much more aware of everything that was happening and why it was happening and why I was feeling what I was feeling. And also now feeling like I had the knowledge to change it. Like now I know why I feel like this, and now I know that I can change this.
Yeah. So what were the beginnings of you changing it? Like really changing it?
So I just remember one time having a session with her and just saying, like, I just don't know what I'm meant to do, right? Like, I just don't know. I know I'm here for something big, and I just don't know what that is. And I'd always wanted, well, not always, but I'd been drawn to be a speaker for a long time because talking's always been a gift of mine. And and I again only recently, like in the last, I don't know, year to prior to that, kind of been aware that that was a thing. Even like people do this for a living, like what? Who knew? And you know, I knew that I wanted a podcast, and I knew that I wanted to impact lots of women. Like, I knew that, and I knew I wanted to make a big kind of imprint in the world, but I just didn't know how. And so this is really what my time with her was, is it's like, what does that look like? And I remember just having this session with her and just saying, you know, I was doing a meditation or something like the night before, and a kind of thought just dropped, and I was like, do I want to be a coach? And I was just like, I think I do. And it was just that kind of aha moment of, I've always been a coach, right? Like, I've always been a coach all my life without knowing it. Like, everyone's always come to me for advice. I've always been the one that's been like the go-to, like, you know, ask Claire, like she'll be the one to kind of get you on the right track. But I never knew that was a thing. And so, yeah, that was kind of the start of it. And then I just started dabbling, right? I just started dabbling. I was like, changed my Instagram and started talking about things that lit me up. And that was a whole journey in itself for about 6 months of not quite knowing who that version of me was, or, you know, what that looked like, and just kind of playing, really. And then there's some other things that happened in between as well, but then late last year, I met my mentor, who I have now, and that really has been the catalyst to the person that I am today.
Yeah, yeah. Because I remember you saying, you know, you had this very successful crystal Instagram, but then you sort of set up a different one, and then established yourself completely differently. It's a very different, you know, expression of you to how you were selling those crystals. That
Yeah.
didn't really translate when you wanted to switch it over. You wanted to, you know, you thought you could just basically convert that audience
Absolutely.
to your coaching clients, and nobody was even
That did not work.
interested.
Yeah, that was a lesson.
Yeah.
A lesson.
And
But
that's
again,
and it's a fierce thing, right? Being visible, being out there, being willing to put yourself out there. You know, it's like I remember a couple of years ago really realizing that all the great artists like Beyonce and all these people, what's so unique about them is their generosity to give themselves to the world in the face of constant criticism, constant opinion, constant, you know, negative feedback. I mean, obviously they get a lot of positive feedback as well, but there is no escaping that journey, that when you want to create a bigger impact, you have to choose visibility. There's no other way to do it. Like, how are you going to reach more people unless you're willing to put yourself into the fire, not in the firing line, into the fire. Yes.
exactly. The baptism
Yeah.
of fire. That's what it was, for sure. But again, it's like, everything happens for a reason, right? And I know, like, with my human design, I'm a 3/6. So part of my journey is to experience things. I'm the role model. So I'm meant to experience things to come out the other side and to show others, like, how to take the shortcut, right? Like, don't do it that way. Like, I did that. That was not great. Like, do it this way. And it's like, now everything that I teach is from those experiences, you know, like, at the moment, I've got a new mini mind about how to start a new Instagram account and get it to skyrocket, because that's what I had to do. That I didn't plan for that to happen. That was just part of my process and part of my journey. And, you know, I didn't know that this would happen. And it's funny, because I talked to my mentor about it earlier, and actually, and I was like, you know, looking back, we can always join the dots, as Steve Jobs says, but you can't join them going forwards. And so I said to her, I was like, you know, I've kind of built this personal brand and this like reputation now, and this authority in the industry. I don't really know how, you know, like, I just kind of did what I did. And looking back, I can see what I did, but I didn't strategically do any of that. And so now what I'm able to do is unpick that and help others implement that, right? It's like, okay, I didn't mean to do all of this, but this is what I actually did, and this worked, and this is how I did it. And now we can give you those codes to help you do that in your own way as well, right? Like you can't replicate what I did, but you can embody
Yeah, I think
and
that's
experience.
I think that's a really important part. And I would say that's the difference between the way women do business and the way men do business. Men have for many years spoken about strategy. Strategy is their thing. But for women, no, because we're so cyclical in nature. We're not linear. So, one strategy is going to work for us one day and it's not going to work for us the second day. It's just not our nature. We're not created that way. It's just not how it works, unfortunately. And any woman who tries to force it is going to find herself burnt out. The truth. There's no getting away from that truth. And I know some, power women who are up there in business. But the truth is the price they're paying is a high price. So I love that you said, it's not about a formula. It's just codes that help you tap into what it is for you uniquely, that help you bring it forward, that help you access it in your own unique way. And I remember when we met, a lot of what you said made so much sense to me. I've been somebody who's been very social media shy. It's taken me quite the while to get out of my own way on that. And, and I've made a conscientious effort to unpick my levels of invisibility, my need to stay safe in the world. And, and I feel like I've come the distance, but just being able to hear you say, you don't need to be all rah, because I'm not. I'm a very quiet kind of person.
Yeah.
But it's about utilizing that in my own way, with my own audience.
And this is what I talk about a lot, right? Because a lot of people, believe it or not, I do actually attract a lot of more like reserved people. So kind of gentler and calmer and like the opposite of me. And it's like, they come and they're like, I freaking love your energy. That's always the first thing. And then it's like, but I don't have that. And that's not me. It's like, you don't need to be like me, right? Like no one should try and be like anyone else. And it's not about that. What it is about is untapping that same level of confidence in yourself, because all my energy is embodied confidence. That's it. And this is just an enhancement of who I am. And when you embody your level of confidence, it will enhance who you are. That doesn't need to be like, rah, rah, look at me, flash my titties out. Like it can be whatever that is to you, but with that personal power behind it, because that is the thing that is magnetic. It's not what you're doing. It's not what you're saying. It's not how you're saying it. It's the energy behind it. And this is why I said last week I had a big dip in my energy because of some personal stuff that I was navigating. And I didn't actually, this hindsight again, right? So at the time, I didn't realize how much it was seeping into my businesses. And I looked back, like when I kind of came out of the dip, and I was like, fuck, like I wasn't there. Like I can see I can't see energetically, but I can feel energetically that I wasn't there. And on the surface, everything can look the same, but you will notice the difference in the DMs. You will notice the difference in the conversions. And when that slows down, you have to go inward and say, how much am I showing up? And I don't mean pressing post, right? I mean showing up in your full
because
power.
there are places within us where it's very confronting to feel certain things, right? There's a lot that we try to avoid feeling within ourselves. There's a huge amount of unpacked story usually about what certain things mean. That's the work. That is the true, work that has to be done, is restructuring your blueprint, I would say.
Yes, like that.
And from there, I certainly know that that's what created all those beautiful years of my business. And I had forgotten that, because it is, you look at it when it's happening easily and you go, I don't know how this is happening. This is just magic. This is just happening. I'm not doing anything. But what you were doing, all the years of preparation that you couldn't see, you were preparing. And that's invisible. It's entirely invisible. Nobody can look into your life and tell you that's what's going on.
Yeah. And we have to be
Only
willing
you
to
know
plant
it.
those seeds, right? Like we have to be willing to be patient, and we have to be willing to not see tangible results whilst we're cultivating and whilst we're creating and whilst we're sowing those seeds to get to the reaping season. Like we can't just expect to suddenly show up one day in like our new big ass energy and be like, where's the money, bitch? Like it doesn't work like that. Like we have to put in the work. And when I say work, I don't mean like blood, sweat, and tears. I mean the authentic, the vulnerable, the powerful, like all of it. And bringing that every single day in your realness and in your rawness and in your unapologeticness, and know that things are happening in the quantum field. Things are happening that you can't see. Like it always blows my mind when I get a DM from someone, they're like, oh, I was speaking to my friend about you and they've started, doing what I learned from you. And I wouldn't know that if they hadn't told me, so much happens that we're not even aware of. And yet if we're not seeing cash in the bank, we're like, oh, it's not working, nothing's happening. And it's like, where's your level of patience?
Yeah, it's very easy in this culture, in this society, in this what seems to be instant, to just give up on something that's inherently true for us, because, like you say, it doesn't seem to translate to instantaneous results. The only thing I can tell you is that, when you have a calling, you can't leave it. It just doesn't leave you. There's nothing about it that's walking out the door. So you kind of, you've got, you like it or not, it's your purpose.
And the thing is, it's gonna bug you, right? It's gonna bug you forever until you do it. Like again, today I was talking to my mentor because it's my one-to-one day today, and I said to her, I've got this massive pull, and I've had it for years to create this in-person event, right? Like this big event, got all these ideas for it. Like I can see it, I can visualize it. I know exactly how it would run. I know everything about it, and I've never done it. And she said, you know what, Claire? At the end of the day, you're either going to do it or you're not. But you feel this calling. So the ball's in your park, right? What are you going to do with that calling? And this is mentorship, right? They can't tell you, go and do it. This is what you need to do. Like they can just reflect back to you what you already know and hold you accountable for your own decisions. And so that was like a big slap in the face. I was like, fuck's sake, like I need to put my big girl panties on and I need to just do it, because I know that is going to niggle away at me until I do it. It's not ever going to go.
Here's the something to be aware of as you move into that, is just the choosing to create it to be fun, the choosing, the collaboration, the choosing that you don't have to do it all on your own, the choosing that doesn't have to be done in that masculine way. Because I know, from my own experience, how much, even though we've had massive transformation, those old patterns, they come calling, almost like a test point to see if we've really learned.
Yeah, it's been a lot of unlearning.
Really,
like stepping into the coaching world it's been a lot of unlearning and a lot of coming home to myself, to who I've always been, and really embodying that. And these days, I mean, fun is like my middle name, right? Like I don't do anything unless it's fun. It's just like doesn't get on my to-do list. So everything I do is about how much does this light me up? Because even if it's in like one of my businesses, if it's not in my zone of genius or it doesn't light me up, I outsource or I delegate. Simple. Because
it just
I am the
feels,
life behind it.
from everything you've shared, from the story, from the path that you've walked, there is something really juicy about this that you've seen. This event really feels like it's an event for women. It's an event to speak to women, and it's an event to even speak to young women before they decide that they're going to go off with Mr. Bad Boy over there. That they can take a breathing moment and realize and tap into their power. Right, to tap into their worthiness and their value. So I think that's the thing that's missing for a lot of us when we're young women. We don't know our value.
No.
We've never experienced our value. And so we have no reflection of our value. And then we make choices and decisions that have long-term impact and consequences. And it takes a long while to repair and restore. It can be done, but it's what really lights me up is when I see young women who have the tools. They're just living the life because they got in early.
Yeah.
Right. They got in with the mentors early. They got in with the structure that they needed early. They didn't have to waste 10 to 15 years of their life and put their children through hell.
And
So
I
it
think there's
feels
a
really
difference as well between like the generations, right? And I think like millennials, like us in particular, the way that we were raised, our parents didn't have the same level of awareness that we have now raising our children. And I mean, God knows what like that next generation will be like. It'd be freaking amazing. But you know, it's that ripple effect as well of evolution, and we're kind of the era that are left trying to like figure out how we navigate this.
well, yeah. I mean, we have access to tools and resources that people couldn't dream of before. And just in terms of access to building a business that didn't exist when I started out in entrepreneurship, there was no real internet. I was up at the business library making everything happen from photocopies and in-person meetings and telephone calls and faxes. A lot slower than what we have access to today. So also the barrier to entry technology wise and financially is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter that it's a whole different thing if fundamentally your blueprint is skewed in favor of unworthiness, not belonging, insignificance. That is fundamentally always going to drive your decisions. Doesn't matter what age you are, what business you're in. If that's running the show and you don't know it, there's always going to be a cost and a high one. So, it's almost like for me, the way I see it is it's our responsibility, but it's also a choice and a privilege to choose to take this on, this work, because as we do, the ripple of that for more people, for future generations, they have less cleaning up to do if we are willing to do it now.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And that's how we empower other women to step into their light, by doing it ourselves, going first and saying, look, it's all right, it's not as bad as everyone like kind of makes you believe it's going to be. If I can do it, you can do it too. So, come along with me.
The visibility part is not too bad.
It's not.
It feels like it's like jumping off of the edge of a cliff, but really you're going to be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Beautiful. Oh, listen, it was so nice to chat and to catch up. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. And yeah, let us know when you're doing the event so that I can put it out and support you. And also, I'll obviously drop your links to, I know you've run this brilliant Iconic as Fuck masterclass. It's a free masterclass. It's for people who want to tap into their visibility on social media. And I will also drop the link to that in the show notes so people can reach out and experience your magic.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. It's been wonderful.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and subscribe to the podcast. If you would love to reach out to my guest or myself, visit the show notes where you'll find all our contact information. Thank you so much for listening.